Veritas Acquitus by Bones Boy 15, Chapter 27, Morning After. Within the tavern known as Mysterious Tree, the patrons had mostly left, save for the owners and a duo of older codgers. So, you believe he's ready? Fugasaku asked the white-haired man. Jiraiya took a sip of his toad-proof sake and looked at Fugasaku. Pa, he said, he's been ready for a year. I only held off because he wanted to get into Beacon. With how certain pieces are moving, I don't know if we'll still be around to see him graduate, let alone initiate him afterwards. He's ready, I know it. That doesn't mean anything, a patron scoffed from the side. The patron wore an open magenta shirt and dark pants that settled over clog-like sandals, similar to Jiraiya's. He had a mug in one hand, which was covered in a gauntlet, similar to Jiraiya's, that he lifted to his mouth, downing the contents with a sloppy slurp. A red monkey tail swishing angrily as the man set the mug down, revealing his face. Messy dark red hair, once gathered in a ponytail atop his head, curtained down over his eyes, and had a thick beard across his chin. A single purple line crossed under his eyes and over his nose, which was crinkled in drunken upset. Roshi, you're drunk. Jiraiya drawled to his feet, and the fellow admirer of the female form. So, doesn't make me any less wrong, Roshi huffed. You're biased, boss man. Biased, Jiraiya corrected him. Fuck you, I'm drunk, Jiraiya hissed and looked at the amused Fugasaku. Can you tell me why we tolerate him? I forgot. Well, I am one of your best infiltrators in the world, best in the world. After me and my second apprentice's wife. Jiraiya smirked and took another sip of his sake. Fugasaku chuckled and gratefully took the offered drink from his wife. By sis. Oh, there's the whole fact that you can't write woman for shit, Roshi said dryly, to which Jiraiya conceded. Shamefully as it was, Jiraiya actually heavily relied on Roshi's descriptions of women more than he did his own artistic talent. Roshi was gifted with a silver tongue and able to compliment anyone, but had two left hands while being right-handed. So when they first started this venture, Roshi would take Jiraiya's notes and create a verbal illustration, which Jiraiya would then translate onto the page and incorporate into the story. Fair enough. Jiraiya sipped his sake again before he smirked. You don't believe me? Challenge him. Roshi cracked an eye open mid-drink and placed his mug to the counter. I'd kill him. Pretty sure that pretty girl's daddy will be aiming to do that, Roshi. Fugasaku chuckled. He rubbed a phantom pain on his shoulder. She must Papa certainly didn't like learning about our union prior to our union. And I have officially become impotent. Thanks for that, Pa. Roshi grumbled before he drank more of his mug's content. Once he finished, he set the mug down and crossed his arms. I was against your initiation of that smug shit, Bronwyn. And look how that turned out. It's nice to have someone on the inside of the Brotherhood, Roshi, Jiraiya pointed out. And Bronwyn came to us, two birds with one stone. A smug fucker of a stone. Such colorful language is only shared for someone you really respect. Respect? Yes. Like? Fuck no. Roshi spat at Fugasaku. He looked at Jiraiya. I ain't saying he's not going to join us. I'm saying it's not right. He ain't ready. Not for what we need to reveal to him. If he were younger, like your daughter was, Jiraiya countered, and Roshi's mouth clapped shut. And you wonder why she doesn't want your grandson near you. That's because you corrupted me after my wife died. Oh, that was done long before your wife died, Roshi, Shima drawled. She walked up and rested an arm on the countertop, her purple eyes going to the white-haired man. Jiraiya, speaking of wives long lost, I haven't spoken to her in a long time, Ma. Jiraiya buffed. She's busy with her apprentices and work. And, the whole, yes, well, she can't blame you for that forever, Shima said with a wave of her hand. She sighed and rested her cheek on her hand. Though I can't blame her much either. Minato Boy and Kushina were the only family she had left. And Naruto was a painful reminder of it, Jiraiya mumbled, his finger tapping on the rim of his sake cup. Oh, bleeding hearts to both of you. Fine, I'll support it, Roshi growled. He held the finger up. But he's gotta fight me first. Will of fire against the breathing volcano. Deal, Shima and Jiraiya agreed. Fukasaku shook his head, a small smile on his face, as he began to assist his great grandsons with cleaning the tavern. He glanced at a picture on the far wall of the tavern, far from the view of the restaurant's patrons, where a young blue-eyed blond man had his arm around the shoulders of a red-headed woman, both seated at the far end of the bar, where plaques had been screwed into the stools they sat on. The green-eyed elder smiled as he reared the stools around stools another time. The seat reserved for the late and great Minato Namikaze slash Kushina Uzumaki, friend to all, family to few, defender of remnant. Your son has grown into a fine young man, Minato boy. I just wish you could have seen it, Fukusaku thought with a sad smile. He blinked and then laughed, drawing his wife and the two men's attention. Naruto-chan and his little girlfriend have run off to express their love for one another, he explained with a smile. If I recall, Minato boy and Kushina did the same thing, skipping dinner entirely. Yes, except Kushina was the one who pulled Minato out, Jiraiya said, grinning. He looked over at the snickering Kichi. Kichi? Yes, Lord Jiraiya. Get your father out here with a round of toad oil all around. Jiraiya grinned and tossed back the rest of his current drink, slamming the empty glass onto the counter upside down. We're celebrating. Oh, God, why are my hips so sore? That was the first thing through Naruto's mind as soon as he unconsciously registered the sunlight shining down on his face, waking him from his slumber. Slowly, he sat up, and a groan escaped Naruto's lips as he did. His right arm and hand were asleep, so Naruto rubbed his eyes with his left while he was trying to figure out the three main questions on his mind. Where am I? What happened last night? And why the hell are my hips so sore? He sat on the side of the bed. The cover slipped off as he did so. Okay, well, that answers one of my questions, Naruto thought as he pulled the blanket back over his waist to cover himself. Shifting his foot, Naruto grimaced at the feeling of something plastic and a bit sticky. A glance and yet another question was answered. That explains the weird line that was too small and nearly broke. The groan to his right made Naruto look over his shoulder. With golden hair sprawled across the bed beneath her head, a sleeping girl lay. A smile worked its way across Naruto's face. And that answers all of my other questions, Naruto mumbled. He looked back down at the item that was too small and grimaced. Damn, those are uncomfortable. Whisker, Yang mumbled, turning onto her side, one arm draped over the space she once occupied. Naruto watched her with a small smile. Last night he'd learned things about Yang. Hell, he learned things about himself that he never expected to learn in a million years. Some was not bad, but different than what he'd expected. It wasn't exactly his first time with the Virgin, but at least this time he made it easier since he had a slight idea of what to expect. Or so he thought. Damn Yang, Naruto said softly as he rubbed the left side of his pelvis and winced. We are keeping that cowboy position on reserve. Naruto stood up and rolled his right shoulder in an attempt to get the blood flowing correctly once more. Once he did that, he reached down and picked up the prophylactic. The used item was promptly discarded into the nearest trash bin. After Naruto got his boxers hanging off of it, he nearly tripped over Yang's boots on his way to the shower. Warm water will loosen me up. Naruto grimaced and rubbed his sour back. For having a semblance that made his body twist as durable as the average man's, he was probably the best suited to handle Yang's use of her impressive strength in the bedroom. If he didn't have that semblance, Naruto was certain that his back would be either dislocated or broken. Likely the former, but still, he was impressed sorely. As soon as the water was running, Naruto got in and a sigh of relief escaped his lips. Oh yeah, almost as good as sex. The sound of running water was the first thing Yang heard when she started to wake up. Lilac eyes blinked open and a sleepy hand reached around the empty side of the bed. When she could see more than blurry shapes, Yang frowned at the being unable to find her boyfriend beside her. Last night was fucking amazing. Pun wholeheartedly intended. Damn, he did me good. Yang grinned and bit on her bottom lip as she relieved the night before in her mind. There was bound to be a whole lot of complaints at the front desk because of them. Yang rubbed her legs together as one of her other hands ran through her hair, and she bit harder onto her lip, her smile growing. Naruto did me real good. Yang's eyes flashed red, and despite the soreness, started to get up from the bed. Her hair shone bright as she limped over towards the bathroom, stumbling for a moment over Naruto's sandals. The door was cracked open, which made it much easier for her to slip in. The door's click, as it should, was covered by the sound of the water raining down on what she knew to be the rock-hard body of her boyfriend. Yang drew the curtain and climbed in with impressive stealth. Her semblance dwindled away, and she startled the occupant of the shower when she almost collapsed against him, pushing him against the wall as she did. Yang, what the? Naruto's question was cut off as she grabbed his head and pulled him into a kiss. They parted, and passionate Lilac stared into confused but kind blue. Good morning, Whisker Boy. Yang breathed as they stared in the shower together. Naruto blinked several times, bewildered and lost by the four words Yang chose to say. Good morning, he uttered back. Yang's lips were still in their wide smile as her hand reached down and grabbed him. Naruto squeaked. It was adorable, really, and Yang's grin became more frightened as her eyes flashed red. Wake up! Yang, we're in the... Oh, I see what you're getting at. An hour and a couple of real and separate showers later, and the blonde duo finally made it down to the lobby of the Stallion Inn. Yang and Naruto were expecting to be met with glares and annoyed looks from the staff, but only received smiles and giggles from the cleaning crews. Naruto, his arm around Yang's waist for her to lean against him. Against him and partly conceal her walking problem, furrowed his brow. I don't get it. With all the noise you made, we made, Yang corrected him, a proud grin on her face. She poked him in the side. You caused most of those noises, Whisker Boy. Yeah, well, anyway. Naruto pointedly kept his gaze off of his girlfriend, his cheeks the lightest hint of red. He cleared his throat and rubbed the back of his neck. You'd think they'd be a bit more volatile. From what I hear, Naruto Boy, your little friend is the one they expected to be volatile. The two froze and turned to a short man seated in a blue chair with a newspaper in his hand. He lowered it and revealed his face, elderly and smiling in amusement. Naruto blinked and lifted a hand, pointed to the man. Hey, you're Shima's husband, the drunk, he said. The man laughed, and the couple shared a confused look. I'm not a drunk, Naruto Boy, the man explained. He folded the paper up and set it to the side, getting to his feet with the aid of a wooden cane. He hobbled over to them and smiled up at the two. A hand was offered up to the teens that were taller than him. My name is Fukasaku Kama. I own the mysterious tree. Oh, yeah. Naruto took the hand and shook it. Pleased to meet you, sir. Well, this wouldn't be the official first time. Fukasaku chuckled and rested his hands on the top of his cane. It's been too long, Naruto Boy. I don't understand. Naruto furrowed his brow. You will in time, Fukasaku nodded. He tapped his cane on the ground inside. And, in advance, I'm sorry I had to ruin your morning, but tradition must be mandated. What? Naruto asked. A sharp "fft" sound caught his attention, and Naruto suddenly jerked. He slapped his hand to his neck, finding something there that wasn't supposed to be. Once he pulled the item from his neck, and held it in his hand. He gasped. In his palm was a dart. What the? There was 5 more before Naruto finally started to fall. He heard Yang call his name once he hit the ground. As darkness encroached over his vision, he saw Yang fall next to him. Her red eyes turned back into lilacs as they unfocused. At least it was a lovely, if not worrying, sight that he was blessed with before his vision went black. Don't worry, she'll be fine, brat. A deep, distorted voice tried to reassure him. For some reason, Naruto had a strong feeling he knew that voice. Yes, I think she's waking up. A familiar, adored voice cheered as two lilac eyes fluttered awake. Ruby, what have I told you about shouting? Yang groaned and rubbed her head as she sat up slightly. She was quickly knocked back down by a flying hug, courtesy of her adorable little sister, and a slobbering kiss on the cheek from Swai, who was standing beside Yang's head. Yang gently shoved Swai away before she roughly pushed Ruby off of her. Ow! Ruby sat up from the ground with a lump on her head and tears in her eyes. Yang, I was so worried. You didn't come back last night. Ruby, She did say that there was a chance of that happening. Blake drawled from her perch on Ruby's bunk behind the team leader, pointedly and notably away from Swy. Oh yeah, Ruby began to turn green. Ew, it's natural. Ruby, stop being such a child, Weiss said with a huff. She leaned against her bed and looked down at Yang. Though I have to admit, I too wonder why Professor Goodwitch had brought you in unconscious. Unconscious? Yang mumbled, her eyes blinking. Ruby gasped. Right, that's right, you were totally out of it, drooling and everything, she said, her face now back to the rosy moonlight pale shade it usually was. What happened? What happened? Well, Naruto and I were. Naruto, oh, when I get my hands on that little troll. Yang's eyes started to turn red, but then drained back to lilac. She frowned in confusion. What the? I can't feel my aura. It's been suppressed, Blake said from her perch, a book on herbs in her hand. Cat-like eyes glanced up, and met Yang's. You were drugged, and based on your reaction, Naruto was too. But Professor Goodwitch said not to worry. Why would she say that if Naruto was drugged? Ruby asked. She cupped her chin and closed her eyes, humming in thought. Her silver eyes snapped open and sparked. It's a mystery. We can investigate. She said it with a forced smile and reminded us that we're stuck in our dorms. Blake reminded her team leader with a sigh. She sent a pointed look at Yang. Your successful escape put all students on dorm lockdown. Foods brought in, but we can't go out. There's Elysian drones everywhere. Oops. Yang grimaced. That was going to cost her some of her old friends. Screw them. Her team in Naruto was all she needed. Not to mention they didn't really stay in contact with her once the school year and team selection thing got started. Jerks. She sighed and flopped back onto what she presumed to be Blake's bunk. Swy jumped over her and went sniffing around the floor. Bathroom, Swy. Yang and Ruby shouted and the corgi disappeared into the tile-floored room. Blake arched a brow. You're kidding me. Hey, he can use a can opener, remember? Ruby pointed out. I'll believe that when Blake was cut off by the sound of a toilet's flush. Swy trotted out and Blake stared at him for a moment. Okay, so maybe he can use a can opener. Swy barked happily at her and she growled at him before returning to her books on herbs. So, you're officially the first of us to do the deed, as it were, Weiss said, trying to appear nonchalant from where she stood. She had her gaze locked on the wall to her right, her arms crossed over her chest, and a light flush on her face. Yeah, so... Oh, you want details? Yang asked, a grin spreading across her face. Weiss's face blossomed into a full-on blush, but she still kept her eyes avert. Blake closed her book. With it set aside, she turned to face Yang, an eager gleam in her eye. Ruby looked between her teammates before she started to turn green. No, wait, you guys want to? Ruby, it's a little grown-up gossip. If it's too much for you, put your headphones on, Blake advised. She wasn't going to lie. She didn't want to hear about Yang and Naruto's first time, but she was a cat fondness, and Adam always said her curiosity got the better of her one time too many. Gross, 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 gross! Ruby zipped around the room searching for her headphones before she found them and jumped up to what usually was Yang's bunk. Her headphones held over her ears and her music cranked up to the safest and loudest volume. So, Blake pried. Yang grinned and sat up fully. Well, first he took me to a nice little tavern just down the street from that accessory shop you like, Weiss. Dart. When's the last time someone needed 6 darts, Pops? Come on, you've got to admit, that's impressive. Shut up, Kichi. He's waking up. My head. Nato groaned and pressed the cool palms of his hands to his temple. It feels like the privy sage just tossed me off a cliff again, and then kicked me in the face. And then the old hag hit me with a sucker punch. Yep, that tends to happen. Nato looked up at the sounds of a familiar chuckle. Privy sage? Jiraiya grinned. Hey, brat, how was your night? You were safe, right? Oof! A firm and tightly balled fist buried itself into Jiraiya's stomach, successfully making the man double over. Jiraiya noted that it was easily the third hardest punch that had ever nailed him in the gut. The first and second belonged to his estranged teammate. The hand then removed itself from Jiraiya's stomach and grabbed the collar of his shirt, pulling Jiraiya face to face with his godson. Blue eyes slowly flickered to gold and back, and Naruto's teeth bared themselves with a vicious snarl. Where is Yang? It was not a question, but it might as well have been. The writer cowering in the back of Jiraiya's mind noted, for good reason too, the snarl was nearly identical to the one that the boy's mother had made the morning after Minato's bachelor party. Well, his technically second bachelor party. Jiraiya wasn't invited to the first one, so he threw the second one. That decision almost cost him his seat at the wedding. Oh, and his life, yeah, it almost cost him that too. She's fine, Naruto. Jiraiya wheezed out. Huh, I never realized how good air tastes. She's back at Beacon. We just had to. Who's we? Naruto interrupted. His eyes narrowed in discontent. His eyes were still flickering, and that alone made Jiraiya realize that maybe he should have waited until after they were back in Beacon before he drugged his apprentice. Easy there, Naruto boy. Naruto's attention snapped over to the elderly man from before, Fukasaku. Oh, thank you God for the mercy you show me. Jiraiya smiled. With Fukasaku there, Naruto would surely release him, and then they could calm the boy down. Naruto's hand wrapped around Jiraiya's throat, tight. Fuck you, God, fuck you, and anyone else like you. Jiraiya mentally screamed while he physically choked. His first assumption upon meeting the boy 5 years ago was right. He squished a son just with Minato's face. Where the hell was all this strength when he was training the boy between ages 13 and 16? You're a dead man. Naruto growled as his eyes shone bright gold. Fukasaku's small smile fell, and he glared back at Naruto. Naruto felt his heart stop beating. No, wait, it was just beating so fast he couldn't feel it anymore. Sweat poured from his head like he'd been doused in it from a bucket. His spine either shriveled away to nothing or slipped right out of his pack, packed its bags, and headed for the nearest air station. His bowels thankfully didn't empty themselves, but they did try to flee back into his stomach as if the digestive acid would protect them. Pa, Jiraiya gasped, pointing frantically at the tight grip around his throat. His face was starting to turn into a lovely and impossibly blend of polka dots. Each dot was a different near white color and caused Kichi huddled off to the side behind Fukasaku to take a picture with his scroll. Release him, Naruto boy, Fukasaku ordered firmly. Because his name was uttered, Naruto's grip around his throat vanished. Jiraiya fell to his hands and knees. He greedily sucked in air, and his skin shifting returned to his normal rosy, sun-kissed tone. Naruto was as pale as Ruby, which for some reason, for someone as tanned as Naruto normally was pretty damn pale. Thankfully, the feeling of utter fear that had encased him vanished once Fukasaku legged up on his glare and smiled once more. As Jiraiya boy said, Naruto boy, your girlfriend is back at Beacon, safe and sound, if not a bit tired from the drug. Fukasaku explained gently. You're safe as well, just in a location we cannot yet disclose. Okay, Naruto mumbled, still a bit out of it. He glanced at Jiraiya, who was now rubbing his neck, and then examined his surroundings. Trees and various plants of different greens surrounded him. The ground was coarse and hard, and a quick glance showed the significant brown dirt in place of what was green carpet the last time he was conscious. A glance up, and he saw the blue sky with slowly drifting clouds. Where? Naruto began as he tried to stand, but fell back to the ground. Ow! Where are we? We, Naruto boy, are home. You! Fukasaku pressed the end of his wooden cane into his chest, and Naruto felt his strained body become filled with energy once more. Are currently 347 miles away from Beacon. Okay, so where are we? Naruto asked again, now back on his feet and looking around curiously. Still only trees and plants thrilling. Follow me, Fukasaku said. He turned and walked out at the small clearing, disappearing between two bushes. Naruto quickly followed him and shielded his eyes with his hand as the full intensity of the sun greeted him. Once adjusted past the glare, and his natural body's aura shield filtered out the intense sunlight. Naruto felt his jaw open in awe. He was currently overlooking a large settlement with people dressed like ninjas, he breathed. Dark clothes that resembled Jiraiya's attire covered every man, woman, human, and faunus alike as they walked, trained, or ate together. Even the kids, though few there were, playing under the watch of adults, had the clothes. He looked down at the sound of a chuckle. His eyes locked on Fukasaku. Welcome, Naruto boy, to the home of the wandering defenders of Remnant, the nomads, or as we were once called before the war, the shinobi. Fukasaku smiled at him and then looked over the place he called home. Welcome to Mount Miyaboku. And you said I made it up, Jiraiya huffed from behind. Naruto turned to look at him. the mark on his neck long gone, and the older man smiled widely. His thumb tapped the horn plate that protected his head. Oh god, you're all deranged perverts, aren't you? Naruto asked, horrified. Fukusaku laughed uproariously, while Jiraiya's face planted into the ground. Lousy no good. And what exactly are you, Whisker Boy? Jiraiya asked as he returned to his feet and glowered at his godson. A saint? No, but I didn't go peeking on women, not according to your juvenile report, which, mind you, still exists here in full detail. That doesn't count. You dragged me along until under the guise of training, and I had nothing better to do, Naruto shouted. A finger pointed accusingly at the older man while his face turned bright red. A likely story. Jiraiya returned the accusing point with his lips spread into a grin. Admit it, you enjoyed it. You offered to go in my stead the day you were caught. I was 14. Of course I enjoyed it. I stopped doing that once I realized that it doesn't get you laid, which was when? On your 16th birthday? A few months after. But that's besides the point. Fukusaku continued to laugh as the two argued. End of chapter 27.